95% Russian. Stalin ticked his agreement. Churchill wondered if the note should be destroyed. Stalin told him, "No, you keep it." Yalta in the Crimea. Churchill wanted the next Big Three meeting to be held in the West, but Stalin insisted on a Soviet meeting place.
Stalin wanted to please them. And I will tell you, I only saw how hard people worked with everything devastated around, bringing crystal glass, bringing white napkins and tablecloths and furniture. Even when Mr. Winston Churchill said once, you know, sort of, "Oh, I wish I had a lemon with my gin and tonic," the next day they found a lemon tree.
The journey was torment for the sick Roosevelt. His polio and the strains of war leadership dragged him down. In the former Tsar's palace, the leaders faced a heavy agenda. They must decide how to govern a defeated Germany, and they wanted to get the Polish question settled.
Eastern Europe, important though it was only one of many other things. First of all, winning the war and then occupying Germany. Secondly, seeing to the war against Japan. Thirdly, the post-war arrangements.
Stalin knew that the war was won. After all, the Russians were only 40 miles from Berlin at that time. They were on the point of capturing Budapest. They'd swept through parts of Eastern Europe, not the whole lot yet.
He was a very shrewd negotiator. He doesn't look you in the eye. He's just sort of smoking. He was a chain smoker. And he was just sort of smoking, and you think that probably he's not listening, you know. Then all of a sudden, he would raise his fingers.
The terrible mistake that Roosevelt made was that he was trying to ingratiate himself into Stalin's favor by stressing the divisions between Churchill and himself. So he made it quite clear to Stalin that there were real divisions as well as imaginary ones.
For us, of course, the major topic was the future of Eastern Europe and above all Poland. And on that, Stalin obviously was bound to get what he wanted because the Red Army was in occupation of the whole area, including Poland. They'd already gone through Poland into Germany by the time we were in Yalta.
By now, the Balkans and most of Poland were in Soviet hands. So too was much of Czechoslovakia and Hungary. Battlefield facts that diplomacy could not alter.
We got at Yalta 2 diplomatic documents, which on paper were perfectly satisfactory. I mean, that there would be a coalition government in Poland, including people from the West, and there would be free elections in Poland. And then there was a declaration covering the whole of Eastern Europe called the Declaration on Liberated Europe, which again was to be rebuilt on the basis of democracy and free elections and all the rest of it. Of course, phrases which the Russian used but interpreted rather differently.
Stalin promised that the Polish elections would be free and fair. Tired of arguing, the others took him at his word. Germany would be governed jointly by the victorious Allies, and Stalin secretly pledged to join the war against Japan. Churchill was confident.
We have all bound ourselves to work together to make sure that there is increasing happiness and prosperity for the broad masses of the people in every land, no longer subject to the hard strains of war. There is the prospect which has now opened before us.
The funeral special heads for Washington. An honor guard of servicemen keeps vigil beside the flag-draped casket. At villages, crossroads, way stations, the people who were so close to his heart stand silently, expressive of the devotion Franklin Roosevelt inspired.
As the president was buried, the last battles in Europe were ending. American troops were taking over German towns without resistance.
They were glad to see the American troops because they had a terrible fear of having Russians occupy or come into their area.
As the Allies advanced, they discovered the full horror of German crimes. The Jews had been the Nazis' special target, but every nation was mourning over mass graves. Fear of a German revival would overshadow the first years of peace. Soon, Soviet and American troops would meet in Germany.
Our lieutenant came in one day and said he wants to get the patrol together. We're going to go and see if we can find some Russians. Well, none of us were too eager to go on that patrol, really, because we realized the end of the war was imminent, and we didn't know what was out there. And, you know, we had gotten this far. Why stick our necks out again?
We kept going, and we kept running into no resistance, and everybody was retiring and surrendering. And we just, I guess, were lucky we got to the Elbe River, and we saw the Russians on the other side.
I told my girlfriend, you stand there and I'll stay here. We waited for them to come ashore. We could see their faces. They looked like ordinary people. We had imagined something different. Well, they were Americans.
I guess we didn't know what to expect from the Russians, but when you looked at them and examined them, you couldn't tell whether, you know, if you put an American uniform on them, they could have been American.
We didn't know who we were kissing. We were just kissing everyone.
I think that for us, the war was over. We washed our feet in the Elbe River. We washed our faces and hands. We thought that now we'd met the Americans, the war must be over.
Two days later, the movie cameras were ready. The moment of history, the meeting of ordinary soldiers from Russia and America, was rerun dramatically with a bigger cast. By Allied agreement, the capture of Berlin was left to the Russians. April 1945, the Red Army launches its final offensive towards Berlin. The war cost the Soviet Union 27 million lives. Nearly 40 times American and British losses put together. The red flag, destined to fly over the Reichstag, was a homemade affair.
We used tablecloths. One night I helped my friend, a Jewish tailor, sew them into 3 flags. We took them to Berlin. I found 3 soldiers and we climbed up. The first photograph I took was of the flag I'd brought from Moscow, the Soviet flag over Berlin.